The year was 2347, and humanity had finally reached the stars. After centuries of dreaming, humans had built ships that could travel between solar systems. They had established small colonies on 3 distant worlds, and Earth itself was thriving under the united government called the Terran Federation. For the first time in history, all nations worked together as one. People believed they were entering a golden age. They were wrong. Ambassador Liam Carter was eating his breakfast in Geneva when the call came. He was a tall man in his 50s with gray streaks in his dark hair and calm brown eyes that had served him well in decades of diplomatic work. He had negotiated peace treaties between nations and resolved conflicts that others said were impossible, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to face. He rushed to the United Nations Space Command headquarters, a massive building of glass and steel that overlooked the Alps. Inside the main chamber, military officers and government officials were already gathered around a holographic display. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. "What do we have?" Liam asked as he entered. Admiral Grace Mitchell turned to face him. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair cut short and eyes that had seen 2 interstellar conflicts. Her uniform was decorated with medals, but she wore them without pride. They were reminders of friends lost. "First contact," Grace said simply, "and they are not friendly." The holographic display flickered to life, and Liam saw an alien for the first time. It was tall and skeletal, with pale blue skin stretched tight over sharp bones. It had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on its narrow face, and each eye gleamed with cold intelligence. The creature wore robes of deep purple, and it held itself with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "I am High Speaker Zorith of the Vorthani," the alien announced. Its voice was smooth and carried an undertone of absolute authority. "I speak for the Galactic Council, the governing body of all civilized species in this region of space. You have been observed, humans. You have been judged." Liam felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his face neutral. 20 years of diplomacy had taught him never to show weakness. "We have watched your kind expand from your small world," Zoroth continued. "You have shown some promise. Therefore, the Council has decided to offer you a place among the governed species. You will dismantle your military fleet. You will submit to Council authority. You will provide labor and resources as directed. In return, you will receive protection and guidance." The alien paused, and its 4 eyes seemed to bore into the camera. "You have 60 rotations to comply? This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is the natural order of the galaxy. All species bow before the Council. You will be no different." The transmission ended, leaving silence in its wake. Liam stood motionless for a long moment. Around him, officers and officials began to murmur, their voices filled with fear and confusion. Some spoke of surrender, of accepting the inevitable. Others talked about fighting, though their voices lacked conviction. Secretary General Daniel Ortega stepped forward. He was a heavy-set man with kind eyes and a gentle manner that had won him election 3 times. But now his face was pale, and his hands trembled slightly. "What do we know about this Galactic Council?" he asked. Intelligence Officer Nina Reyes pulled up data on the display. She was young, barely 30, with sharp features and sharper instincts. She had spent her career analyzing threats that did not exist yet, preparing for scenarios that seemed impossible. This was exactly the kind of situation she had trained for. "Based on the signals we have intercepted and decoded over the past century, the Galactic Council is massive," Nina explained. "It comprises over 300 species across thousands of worlds. Their fleets number in the millions. They have been the dominant power in this region of the galaxy for approximately 50,000 years, their military record." Grace asked. Nina hesitated. "They have never lost a war. They have absorbed every species they have encountered. Some peacefully, most by force." The room fell silent again. Liam looked around at the faces of his colleagues. He saw fear, despair, resignation. These were the leaders of humanity, the best and brightest. They were ready to give up before the fight had even begun. Something stirred inside him. It was anger, but also something deeper: pride, defiance. The stubborn refusal to accept what others said was impossible. "No," he said quietly. Daniel turned to him. "What?" Liam stepped forward until he stood in the center of the room where everyone could see him. "I said no. We do not surrender. We do not bow. We do not submit to some alien council that treats us like cattle." "Liam," Daniel said gently, "you heard the numbers. Millions of ships. Thousands of worlds. We have, what, a few hundred vessels? We cannot win this." "Maybe not," Liam admitted. "But that does not mean we should not fight. That does not mean we should betray everything our species has ever stood for." He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. Humanity has faced extinction before. Ice ages, plagues, wars that killed hundreds of millions. Every time someone said we were finished, every time, we proved them wrong. Grace stepped up beside him. Her voice was steady and strong. "The ambassador is right. These aliens expect us to fold. Their entire strategy is based on intimidation. They have never faced a species willing to fight to the end." Nina nodded slowly. "Their doctrine has not changed in millennia. They rely on overwhelming force and the assumption of surrender. They have no contingency for prolonged resistance." "Then we give them something new," Liam said. "We make them pay for every inch. We show them that Earth, that humanity is not like the others. We may be young. We may be outnumbered. But we are not afraid." Daniel looked at him for a long moment. The fear was still there in his eyes, but something else was growing alongside it. Hope, perhaps. Or maybe just the simple human refusal to go quietly into the dark. "The General Assembly will need to vote," Daniel said finally. "Then call them," Liam replied. "Let every nation decide for itself. Let every human have a voice in this." The vote took 3 days. Representatives from every nation on Earth and every colony in space cast their ballots. The debates were fierce. Some argued for submission, for survival at any cost. Others spoke of freedom, of dignity, of the right to choose one's own fate. In the end, the result was nearly unanimous. Earth would not bow. When the Vorsani returned for their answer on the 60th day, Liam Carter stood before the camera with the full weight of humanity behind him. His voice did not waver. "This is Ambassador Liam Carter of the Terran Federation. We have received your terms. We have considered them carefully, and we reject them. Earth does not kneel. If you want our world, you will have to take it from us, and we will make you pay a price you cannot imagine." The transmission ended. In the headquarters, Grace Mitchell allowed herself a small smile. Well, she said, "Now we just have to figure out how to back that up." The war for Earth's survival had begun. The days after Earth's refusal were filled with controlled chaos. Every shipyard on Earth, Luna, and Mars worked around the clock. Factories that had made consumer goods now produced weapons and armor. Scientists who had studied peaceful exploration now designed systems meant to kill. The entire species had shifted to a war footing. The transformation was both terrifying and inspiring. Admiral Grace Mitchell stood at the center of it all. She had been given command of all Terran military forces, and she accepted the responsibility with grim determination. Her headquarters was a converted mining station orbiting Earth, chosen because it could be moved if necessary. She spent 18 hours a day reviewing reports, approving designs, and pushing her people to work faster. "We have approximately 2 months before they arrive," she told her senior staff during their first strategy meeting. "Probably 3,000 warships based on the intelligence we have gathered. Our current fleet numbers, just over 400 vessels, most of which were designed for exploration and commerce, not combat." Commander Jake Sullivan raised his hand. He was a practical man in his 40s, more comfortable with machinery than meetings. His hands were calloused from years of engineering work, and his simple approach to problems had saved countless lives during the Mars colony expansion. "What about converting civilian ships?" he asked. "We have thousands of mining vessels, cargo haulers, and transports. They are not pretty, but they are tough." Grace nodded. "That is exactly what I want you to lead. Take whatever resources you need. I want every ship that can hold a weapon ready for combat. Jake spent the next weeks working miracles. He led teams of engineers who stripped civilian vessels down to their frames and rebuilt them as makeshift warships. Mining lasers became weapons. Cargo bays became fighter hangars. Ore processors were modified to launch projectiles at devastating speeds. Dr. Priya Sharma, the lead physicist on the project, shook her head in amazement as she watched a battered mining ship undergo transformation. "This should not work," she said. "By every standard of military engineering, these conversions are absurd." Jake wiped grease from his hands and shrugged. Good thing nobody told the ships that. Meanwhile, on the diplomatic front, Liam Carter was fighting his own battle. He knew that humanity could not win alone. They needed allies, or at least neutrals, who would not help the Council. He reached out through every channel he could find, sending messages into the dark spaces between stars. Most went unanswered. Some returned with warnings to surrender while there was still time. But one message brought something unexpected: hope. The response came from a species called the Corvethi, reptilian beings who had once been conquered by the Council and had somehow won their freedom centuries ago. Their ambassador, a scarred old warrior named Corveth, agreed to meet Liam in secret on a remote asteroid station. The station was cold and dark, barely maintained, the kind of place where desperate people made desperate deals. Liam arrived alone, as requested, and found Corveth waiting in a small chamber lit by a single flickering light. Corveth was impressive, despite his age. He stood 7 feet tall, his green scales marked with the white lines of old wounds. His yellow eyes studied Liam with an intensity that made the human uncomfortable. "You are either very brave or very foolish," Corveth said without greeting. "No species has defied the Council and survived, not in 50,000 years." "There is a first time for everything," Liam replied. Corveth made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your kind has spirit. I will give you that. But spirit does not stop plasma bolts." "No," Liam agreed, "but spirit can inspire others. I am not here to ask you to fight for us. I am here to ask you to watch, to wait. And when we show that the Council can bleed, I am asking you to remember your own chains." Corveth was silent for a long moment. "You truly believe you can hurt them?" "I believe we will die trying, and I believe that matters." The old warrior studied him with those ancient eyes. "There are others like my people, the remnant worlds, we call ourselves. Species that have tasted council, rule, and hate it. We are scattered, weak, afraid, but we remember what freedom felt like." "Then help us remember it again," Liam said. "Not with ships or weapons, just with hope. Let your people know that someone is finally standing up." Corveth extended his clawed hand, and Liam took it without hesitation. The grip was strong enough to crush bone, but gentle enough to promise trust. "If you survive the first battle," Corveth said, "I will make sure the remnant worlds hear of it. Beyond that, I can promise nothing." "That is enough," Liam replied. "That is more than we had before." Back on Earth, the preparations continued. Captain Maria Delgado trained the fighter pilots who would be humanity's first line of defense. She was a small woman with dark hair and eyes that had seen too much death too young. Her squadron had been nearly wiped out during a pirate attack 3 years ago, and she had rebuilt it from nothing. She knew what it meant to fight against impossible odds. "We are not going to meet them head-on," she told her pilots during a training session. "We are faster and more maneuverable than their heavy ships. We hit, we run, we disappear before they can target us. Make them chase shadows." Her pilots were young, scared, and determined. They practiced until their hands blistered and their eyes blurred. They learned to fly through asteroid fields at speeds that should have been suicidal. They studied Council ship designs until they knew every weakness, every blind spot. Nina Reyes provided the intelligence that made their training possible. She and her team worked in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss mountains, analyzing every scrap of data about the Council they could find. Intercepted communications, ancient records from dead civilizations, rumors from the galactic underworld. What she discovered gave them their strategy. Council has not fought a real war in over 10,000 years, she reported to Grace. Their tactics are completely standardized. They expect enemies to form defensive lines that they can overwhelm with numbers. They have no experience with guerrilla warfare, asymmetric tactics, or enemies who refuse to engage on their terms. Grace smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Then we give them an education. The Terran strategy took shape over the following weeks. They would not try to hold territory or win decisive battles. Instead, they would become ghosts. Strike at supply lines. Ambush isolated units. Destroy infrastructure and vanish before reinforcements arrived. Make the cost of every advance so high that the Council would question whether Earth was worth the price. It was not a strategy for victory. It was a strategy for survival. And maybe, just maybe, for inspiring others to join the fight. On the night before the Council fleet was expected to arrive, Liam Carter stood on a balcony overlooking Geneva. The city lights sparkled below and above. The stars shone with a cold beauty that had once seemed peaceful. Now they looked like a battlefield waiting to happen. Grace joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. They stood in silence for a while, watching the night. "Do you think we have a chance?" Liam asked finally. Grace considered the question carefully. "Honestly, no. Not if we measure success by conventional standards. They are too big, too powerful, too established." She took a sip of her coffee. "But we might be able to hurt them badly enough that others finish what we start. And that is worth something." Liam nodded slowly. "Then let us hurt them." The next morning, the first Council scout ships entered the solar system. The war for Earth had truly begun. The Council fleet arrived on the 61st day, exactly as they had promised. Supreme Commander Vecthos of the Vorthani led them personally, commanding from his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. It was a massive vessel, 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Behind it came 3,000 warships of various sizes, each one representing centuries of military development and the might of a galactic empire. Vata stood on his bridge, watching the small blue world grow larger in the display. He was old even by Vorthani standards, having served the Council for 200 years. He had conquered 17 species, crushed 43 rebellions, and never once failed in his duty. This mission, he believed, would be simple. "Broadcast the final warning," he ordered. His voice echoed across every frequency, reaching every ship in the human fleet, every station, every colony, and every home on Earth. "Humans of Earth, your time has ended. This is your last opportunity to surrender. Submit now, and your population will be spared for labor allocation. Resist, and you will be eradicated. You have 1 hour to respond." In Geneva, Liam Carter stood before the communication console with Grace Mitchell beside him. Behind them, the entire command staff watched in silence. The hour seemed both endless and far too short. When it ended, Liam pressed the transmit button. "This is Ambassador Liam Carter of the Terran Federation. We have heard your terms. We reject them. Earth does not kneel. If you want our world, come and take it. But know this, we will not make it easy. We will not surrender. We will fight with every ship, every weapon, and every breath until there is nothing left to fight with. And when you count your dead, when you measure the cost of this conquest, you will know that humanity was here, that we mattered, that we refused to bow." The transmission ended. Across the fleet, humans braced themselves for what was coming. Vectos felt something he had not experienced in decades: surprise. He had expected pleas for mercy, desperate negotiations, perhaps a token resistance followed by quick surrender. This defiance was something new. "Begin the assault," he ordered. Standard pacification protocol. The Council fleet moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of death advancing toward the asteroid belt where the human defenders waited. Their sensors showed the human ships scattered among the rocks, seemingly random and disorganized. The Council officers dismissed them as frightened prey hiding from predators. They were wrong. Commander Jake Sullivan waited aboard the converted mining vessel Hammer. Hidden in the shadow of a massive asteroid, his ship was ugly and battered, nothing like the sleek warships of the Council. But it carried mass drivers capable of hurling chunks of iron at velocities that could punch through any armor. "Wait for it," he murmured to his crew. "Wait until they enter the kill zone." The Council's scout squadron entered the asteroid belt confidently, their shields at minimum power to conserve energy. They expected nothing. After all, these were primitives, now Jake said. 20 human ships emerged from hiding simultaneously, firing as they moved. The mass drivers roared, sending projectiles screaming through space at speeds the Council sensors could barely track. The first scout ship exploded before its crew even knew they were under attack. The second followed moments later. The Council squadron tried to return fire. But the humans were already gone, vanishing back into the asteroid field. Their ships twisted through gaps that should have been impossible, using the terrain in ways the Council had never encountered. In 8 minutes, 15 Council ships were destroyed. Not a single human vessel was lost. On the Eternal Dominion, Vecthos watched the reports with growing unease. What happened? He demanded. His tactical officer struggled to explain. They used the asteroids as cover, Supreme Commander. They appeared, fired, and disappeared before we could target them. Our standard formation left gaps that they exploited. Just the formation. Send a full combat group. The second engagement was larger, but no more successful. Captain Maria Delgado led her fighter squadron against a convoy of supply ships. Striking from an angle the Council believed was impossible. Her pilots flew with reckless precision, dodging between enemy vessels, releasing their payloads and vanishing before the heavier ships could bring their weapons to bear. 40 supply ships burned. Maria lost 3 pilots, brave souls whose names she committed to memory even as she ordered the retreat. "Ghostwing, this is base." Grace's voice crackled through her cum. "Outstanding work. Return to rearm." "Copy that, base." Returning home, pattern continued for days. The Council advanced, the humans struck, and both sides counted their dead. The numbers still favored the Council overwhelmingly, but the toll was growing in ways they had not anticipated. More troubling for Vecthos were the reports from occupied territories. Word of Earth's resistance was spreading. The remnant worlds were stirring, their populations whispering about the small species that dared to fight back. For the first time in millennia, the Council's absolute authority was being questioned. "We need to end this quickly," Vecthos told his officers. "The longer this continues, the more others will be inspired. Prepare for a direct assault on Earth itself. Overwhelming force. We crush them completely and broadcast it to every world. Let all species see what happens to those who defy us." The Council fleet gathered for the push toward Earth. Thousands of ships formed into a massive wedge, their weapons charged and their shields at maximum. Behind them came the support vessels, the troop carriers. The occupation forces meant to take control after the defenders fell. Grace Mitchell watched them come, her face grim. The guerrilla tactics had worked better than she had hoped, but they could not stop this. The Council had decided to pay the price, and humanity did not have enough ships to collect. "All units fall back to Earth orbit," she ordered. "Prepare for final defensive positions." Liam stood beside her, watching the tactical display fill with enemy contacts. "How long can we hold? Hours, maybe? A day at most." Grace turned to face him. "I am sorry, Liam. We tried. Did more than try. We showed them we were not cattle. We showed the galaxy that someone was willing to stand." He managed a tired smile. "That has to count for something." The final battle for Earth began at dawn, Greenwich time. The Council fleet swarmed toward the planet, ignoring the defensive stations, crushing the few ships that tried to intercept them. Their target was Earth itself, the heart of human civilization. But the humans had one last surprise. Jake Sullivan had spent the previous days hiding a portion of the converted mining fleet behind the moon. These were the largest ships, the ones too slow for guerrilla tactics, but powerful enough to deal real damage. He had filled their cargo holds with every explosive, every chunk of radioactive material, every weapon they could not use elsewhere. As the Council fleet focused on Earth, Jake led his suicide squadron into their exposed flank, The impact was devastating. Mining ships crashed into warships, their payloads detonating on contact. The explosions tore through the Council formation, destroying dozens of vessels and damaging hundreds more. Jake's ship was among the last to strike. In his final moments, he saw the Council flagship looming before him, its shields flickering from the chaos around it. "For Earth," he said quietly, and pushed the throttle forward. The hammer struck the Eternal Dominion at full speed. The explosion nearly broke the flagship in half, killing hundreds of crew members and sending the massive vessel spiraling out of control. Supreme Commander Vecthos survived, but barely. As medical officers rushed to treat his wounds, he looked at the tactical display showing the chaos his fleet had become. These humans were not like any enemy he had ever faced. They did not surrender. They did not break. They fought until death, and they made that death mean something. For the first time in 2 centuries, Vecthos felt fear. The battle for Earth had cost the Council dearly, but they still held the advantage. Their fleet, though damaged and demoralized, still outnumbered the human defenders 10-1. Supreme Commander Vecthos, recovered from his injuries, but marked by new scars, ordered his forces to establish a siege around the planet. No ships would enter or leave. Earth would be starved into submission. Months passed. The siege was brutal, but not complete. Human ships continued to slip through Council lines, carrying supplies to the besieged world and striking at enemy positions before disappearing. The Council controlled space, but they could not control the shadows between the stars. On Earth, life had become hard, but not hopeless. Rationing was strict. Factories worked constantly, and every citizen understood that survival depended on their efforts. Liam Carter had become the face of human resistance. His speeches broadcast to every corner of the planet and smuggled to the colony worlds beyond. "They think they can break us with hunger and fear," he said in one famous address. "They do not understand us. We have faced ice ages that covered our world. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have endured wars and famines and disasters that should have ended our species. Every time, we came back stronger. This siege is just another challenge, and we will overcome it as we have overcome everything else." The word spread beyond Earth. True to his promise, had made sure the remnant worlds knew of humanity's stand. Underground networks carried recordings of Liam's speeches to species that had known only submission for generations. The message was simple. If these young, primitive humans could fight back, why not us? Admiral Grace Mitchell focused on the military situation. The suicide attack had bought them time, but they needed more than time. They needed a victory significant enough to shatter Council morale completely. The opportunity came from an unexpected source. Nina Reyes and her intelligence team had intercepted communications revealing that Vecthos had established his command base on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. From there, he coordinated the siege, managed supply lines, and planned the final assault that would crush Earth once and for all. Grace called a meeting of her senior officers. Captain Maria Delgado attended, along with the commanders of the remaining warships and a young lieutenant named Danny Cooper who had emerged as one of the most brilliant tactical minds of the war. "Titan is heavily defended," Grace began, displaying holographic images of the moon and its orbital defenses. "The base itself is built into the rock, designed to withstand orbital bombardment. There are 3 heavy weapons platforms in orbit, plus a permanent garrison of ground troops." "You want us to attack it?" Maria said. "It was not a question. I want us to take it. Kill or capture Vecthos. Destroy the command structure." Grace paused. "If we succeed, the Council fleet will be left without leadership. Their centralized command system is efficient, but it leaves them vulnerable when that command is removed." Danny leaned forward. "How do we get past the orbital defenses? We do not have the firepower for a direct assault. We do not need firepower. We need precision." Grace pulled up another display, showing a complex route through the Saturn system. The rings provide natural cover. If we time it right, we can use the planet's magnetic field to mask our approach. A small strike force could reach Titan before they know we are coming. "Small means vulnerable," Maria pointed out. "If they detect us, we are finished. Then we make sure they do not detect us. Grace looked around the room. I will not order anyone to take this mission. Volunteers only. The chances of survival are low, but the potential reward is the turning point of this war. Every officer in the room volunteered. The strike force was assembled in secret. 5 converted warships, 200 ground assault troops, and Maria's fighter squadron for close support. They launched from a hidden base in the asteroid belt. Using minimal power to avoid detection, the journey to Saturn took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of silence, of tension, of knowing that discovery meant death. The soldiers trained constantly, preparing for combat against enemies, who were physically larger and technologically superior. Leading the ground assault was a young sergeant named Kyle Martinez. He had been a teacher before the war, a man who had never fired a weapon in anger until the council came. Now he carried enough scars to prove his dedication to humanity's survival. Remember your training, he told his troops as they approached Titan. The Vorthani are stronger than us, but they are not used to fighting in close quarters. They expect enemies to keep their distance. We get in their faces, we move fast. We do not give them time to use their advantages. Maria's pilots flew ahead, scouting the approach. The orbital defenses were exactly where intelligence had predicted, their patrol patterns unchanged for centuries. Council arrogance would be their downfall. The attack began at exactly 0300 local time. Maria's fighters struck the weapons platforms first, their missiles tearing through shields that had never faced combat. 2 platforms were destroyed before they could fire a single shot. The third managed to launch a distress signal before Maria personally put a missile through its reactor. Platforms down, she reported. Ground team, you are clear. The assault ships descended through Titan's thick orange atmosphere, their heat shields glowing from the friction. Anti-aircraft fire reached up toward them, but the council gunners had not practiced for years. Their shots went wide, and the human ships landed their troops without losing a single vessel. Kyle was first out of his ship, his boots hitting the frozen ground of Titan around him. 200 soldiers spread out, moving toward the command base with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this moment, memorized every corridor and room of the base from intelligence reports. Now it was time to put that training to use. The base defenses were strong, but not invincible. Kyle's team breached the outer perimeter using shaped charges, then fought their way through corridors designed for beings taller than humans. The lower ceilings gave them an advantage, forcing the Vorthani defenders to crouch and limiting their mobility. The fighting was brutal. Humans fell, their bodies left behind as their comrades pushed forward. But the Vorthani fell too, their arrogant certainty crumbling as these small, fierce creatures refused to stop. Kyle reached the command center, with 30 soldiers still standing. The doors were reinforced, designed to withstand siege weapons. He did not have siege weapons. He had something better. Martinez to Delgado. I need a precision strike on these coordinates. Right on top of us. Maria's voice came back sharp with concern. Kyle, that is danger close. 1 degree off, and we kill you all. Then do not be 1 degree off. We cannot breach these doors any other way. Then, copy that ground team. Heads down in 30 seconds. Kyle ordered his soldiers to take cover in the corridors behind them. They pressed against the walls, covered their ears, and prayed. The missile hit exactly where it needed to. The blast tore through the reinforced doors, sending debris flying through the command center. Kyle was through the breach before the smoke cleared, his weapon up and firing. Supreme Commander Vectos was waiting, wounded but still standing. The old warrior held a ceremonial blade, ready to die fighting. You should not be here, he said, his voice filled with disbelief. This is impossible. Kyle kept his weapon trained on the alien commander. Yeah, we hear that a lot. For a moment, neither moved. Then Vectos made his choice. He threw down the blade and raised his hands. I surrender, he said, the words clearly painful. Take me to your leaders. Kyle bound the commander's hands and activated his communicator. This is ground team to all units. We have the target. Vectos is captured. I repeat, we have the Supreme Commander. The cheer that went up from the human forces could be heard across every frequency. On Earth, Liam Carter watched the news with tears in his eyes. In the Council fleet, officers and soldiers alike stared at their displays in shock. The impossible had happened. Humanity had struck at the heart of the Council's military power and won. The siege of Earth was about to end, not with surrender, but with victory. The capture of Supreme Commander Vectos changed everything. The Council fleet, so confident in its inevitable victory, fell into chaos. Without their leader, the various species that made up the invasion force began to argue about what to do next. Some wanted to continue the assault. Others urged retreat. A few quietly vanished, their ships slipping away into the darkness between stars. The footage of Vectos in chains spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Corveth and the remnant worlds made sure of that, broadcasting it to every system where oppressed species might be watching. For 50,000 years, the Council had seemed invincible. Now they had been humbled by a species that had barely left their home world. On Earth, the reaction was celebration mixed with caution. Liam Carter addressed the planet from the same balcony in Geneva where he had watched the stars before the first battle. "We have won a great victory," he said. "But the war is not over. The Council still has thousands of ships, hundreds of worlds. They will not forget what we have done, and they will not forgive. We must use this moment wisely. Not for revenge, but for peace. Not for conquest, but for freedom. If we become what we fought against, then we have lost everything we struggled to protect." His words were heard beyond Earth. In the remnant worlds, species that had been silent for generations began to speak. On Council-controlled planets, underground movements emerged from hiding. The spark that humanity had lit was spreading into a fire. 3 months after the Battle of Titan, Liam Carter stood in a place no human had ever been, the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council. The chamber was vast, designed to awe and intimidate. Delegates from hundreds of species sat in ascending rows, their attention focused on the small figure standing at the central platform. Liam looked up at them without fear. He had faced worse than contemptuous stares. The Vorthane Prime Counselor, an ancient being named Zetheris, spoke first. His voice echoed through the chamber, carrying centuries of authority. "You are Liam Carter, the human who rejected our offer of peace?" "I am," Liam replied. "And it was not peace you offered. It was slavery dressed in pretty words." A murmur rippled through the assembly. No one spoke to the Prime Counselor that way. Zetheris continued as if he had not heard. "You have caused significant damage to our forces. You have captured one of our most decorated commanders. You have inspired rebellion in systems that had been pacified for millennia." "I know," Liam said, "and I am only getting started." The murmur became a roar. Delegates shouted in languages Liam could not understand. Zetheris raised a hand, and silence fell. "You threaten us? Here, in our own chamber?" Liam shook his head. "I do not threaten. I observe. Your council has ruled through fear for 50,000 years. But fear only works if your subjects believe they cannot win. We have shown them otherwise. Look around this chamber. Count how many seats are empty today. Those species have already decided that your empire is dying." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The remnant worlds are rising. Other systems are asking questions they never dared ask before. Your empire is not falling because of us. It is falling because it was built on lies and fear, and we exposed the truth." Zetheris leaned forward, his 4 eyes burning with rage. "You have made enemies of the most powerful civilization in existence. We will destroy your world. We will erase your species from history." "You could try," Liam agreed. "You might even succeed, but it will cost you. Every ship you send against us is a ship you cannot use elsewhere. Every soldier who dies on Earth is a soldier who cannot crush the rebellions spreading through your territory. And even if you burn our world to ashes, you cannot kill what we have started." The idea of freedom does not die with the people who first spoke it. He turned to address the entire assembly. "I did not come here to beg for mercy or negotiate surrender. I came here to offer you a choice. Continue this war and watch your empire crumble from within. Or end it now, Recognize that every species has the right to determine its own fate and build something new. Something better than what you have. The chamber was silent. Liam could see the fear in their eyes, but also something else. Hope, perhaps. Or maybe just exhaustion with the old ways. Zathera stood, ancient and terrible. You offer us nothing but chaos. I offer you change, Liam corrected. What you call chaos, others call freedom. The choice is yours. He turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving the assembled delegates in stunned silence. The war did not end that day. It took another 2 years of negotiations, skirmishes, and slow transformation. But the tide had turned irreversibly. The council fractured as species withdrew their support. The remnant worlds formed a new alliance based on voluntary cooperation rather than forced. Submission Arth became a symbol of hope for the galaxy. The small blue world that had defied the mightiest empire in known space inspired countless others to seek their own. Freedom. Admiral Grace Mitchell retired to a small farm in Montana, far from the stars she had fought to protect. She spent her days in quiet contemplation, sometimes visited by old soldiers who wanted to thank her for her leadership. She always told them the same thing. They had done the hard work. She had just pointed the way. Captain Maria Delgado stayed in the military, training the next generation of pilots. Her Ghost Wing became legendary, and she made sure every new recruit understood what that name meant. They fought for something beyond themselves. Corveth visited Earth once, near the end of his long life. He walked the streets of Geneva with Liam, marveling at the crowds of humans going about their daily lives. You changed everything, Corveth said. We had given up hope. Then you showed us what was possible. Liam shook his head. We just refused to bow. The rest happened because others were ready to stand. Kyle Martinez returned to teaching after the war. He spoke to his students about history, about the importance of standing up for what was right, about the cost of freedom and the price of silence. Sometimes when he was alone, he looked at the stars and remembered his friends who had not come home. They deserved a galaxy where people were free. 10 years after the war ended, the Galactic Assembly met for the first time. It was not a council of conquerors, but a forum for equals. Representatives from over 500 species gathered to discuss trade, peace, and cooperation. Old enemies sat beside new friends. The universe was still dangerous, still full of challenges. But now, there was hope that those challenges could be faced together. Liam Carter, now elderly but still sharp, was asked to speak at the opening ceremony. He stood at the podium, looking out at the faces of beings he had once known only as enemies. We are here today because someone decided to say no, he said. When the powerful demanded submission, one small world refused. We did not know if we would survive. We only knew that some things were worth dying for. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Freedom is not something that can be given. It must be claimed, defended, and earned.